Okay. So good morning, wherever you are experiencing heat, probably most of you. So let's begin with our Sunday class with a little bit of well-needed meditation. So relax your body, sit comfortably. If you're sitting cross-legged, try to get them in a position where your spine can be erect. Let go of the tension. Let go of the mental tension. There's nothing new that's happening to you, even if it's catastrophic, that hasn't happened numberless times before. There's nothing you have to think about. Just place your mindfulness on the breathing in front and the respiration. Try to give up multitasking. By that I mean, don't let your mind kind of think of some other things while you're watching your respiration. Let that be your sole focus. Although this faculty of the mind called mindfulness can also be used in memory, here its function is to keep that which you've already experienced, this respiration, in the forefront of your awareness, letting everything else fade into the background. If your mind is a little bit calmed through that breathing meditation, now bring your attention to your mental consciousness. Let go of attention to the breathing. Look at the thoughts, images, memories, plans, emotions, worries, whatever in your mind. And through the example of thinking of them like clouds in an otherwise clear sky, let go of your attention to them and concentrate instead on the clear nature of the mind within which they're arising. None of those worries or problems or images are permanent. They are transitory. They don't infiltrate the nature of the mind, even if they might be long-lasting. Here, the clear light nature, conventional clear light nature of the mind, is not something that you would imagine having a visual appearance, although if you say light, it almost sounds that way. It's clear, it's unobstructing. Even the presence of thoughts and emotions at any one time don't change its basic nature. We can develop good thoughts, positive states of mind like love and compassion and wisdom and renunciation that we may not have now. They definitely can grow in this space of the mind, or if you like to think, the garden of your mind, the laboratory of your mind. And you can definitely remove your fixation upon fears or anger, jealousy. This is a sign that we ourselves can become enlightened. It's called the conventional Buddha potential, Buddha nature. Sometimes called the developmental Buddha nature. Because of this quality of the mind, we can develop good qualities and we can eliminate negative reactions to the appearances. As before, we mentioned, reflect for a few moments on the fact that the occasion of being able to recognize this clear light nature has come about because of having a life of leisure and endowment. Beings in the animal realm or the hell realm or the spirit realm, not having heard the teachings, being overcome by worries for their own safety, for in the hell realms, constant suffering, have no way to imagine their development like this. But this life that we have now of leisure and endowment is not permanent. it is disintegrating. The lifetime that we have left to live is disappearing moment by moment. So to take advantage of this morning, this opportunity of leisure and endowment, to make use of its great meaning or potential to generate positive thoughts, to eliminate our faults, to find happiness for ourselves, but more importantly, to become a real, fully qualified person, a bodhisattva, working for the welfare of others. How wonderful that would be. I think this next hour or so, hour and a half, I'm going to let go of other worries or thoughts, not simply to accumulate Buddhist information or knowledge, but to learn the techniques and to put them into practice, hearing the teachings, contemplating them, meditating on them, to overcome my faults so that I don't create negative karma that harms me, and so that I don't injure others. I don't harm others with my anger or my depression or my clinginess or my jealousy. And to develop actual positive states of mind, empathy, compassion, love, patience, renunciation, to be able to benefit other sentient beings. I'm going to participate this morning to accumulate the causes to become enlightened for the sake of all sentient beings. Try to set that as your motivation for being here and participating this morning. And not just this morning, all the rest of our life, all the future lives, if you can kind of pervade that sense, leave an imprint in your mind, using this opportunity to overcome my own problems, but more importantly, to become enlightened, to be able to lead others out of suffering. And then to bring your attention back to the present. So, how is everyone feeling? Okay. Any questions or doubts or corrections? Suzanne is in her nurse's gown there. Where's Suzanne? Suzanne, where are you? Suzanne Kennedy. Maybe she's off getting a cup of tea. Okay, it doesn't matter. So, anyone have any, oh, Leah, you have your hand up. Thank you. Clever.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Venerable George, thank you so much for being here for all of us. My question, I've been thinking so much about it since last week's teaching, and it's this, that I'm relatively new to the teachings, but I do contemplate suffering of sentient beings, and I am so happy to have found the teachings. And when I found the teachings, the marvels of this life became more marvelous. And I don't want to give them up. And I think renunciation seems like impossible, because this life is a marvel, because here we all are. Here's where we can learn about the teachings, and that just even like nature and understanding people, it's just the teachings have made the natural world more marvelous. And at the same time, I understand the depth of the suffering more too. Do you have any advice?
So yeah, renunciation, although we've talked about renunciation earlier as though that's on the sort of initial intermediate steps of developing realizations. Renunciation is quite difficult, because renunciation talks about, say for instance, in the Hinayana, the Theravada teachings, the monks or nuns or lay people that are practicing Buddhists, they have to develop a mind that is not attracted and compulsively controlled by our attachment to the pleasures of this life, beauty and things going well and good, pleasure of the senses, good food and sunsets and fine wine and pleasant company, never hearing harsh words. That's all difficult to give up, because we've familiarized ourselves with attachment since beginningless time. And also, we don't see the shortcomings of that attachment, following attachment. So renunciation doesn't mean giving up any pleasure whatsoever. You're still going to have pleasure, when you eat your food, and you can, if your aim is to have a nice, healthy, tasty meal, there's no problem with that. It's a difference between, let's say, if given a choice, what would I prefer? Dry chapatis. I don't know if you know chapatis. They're Indian, bread. If you go to the restaurant, they'll be nice and moist and hot. What would I prefer? Dry chapatis or a nice beef stroganoff? Well, I prefer beef stroganoff, or my favorite almond stroganoff, where if you're a vegetarian, you can use almonds instead of the beef in your stroganoff. But if I don't have my stroganoff, I'm joking, because I make my own version of it. I call cashews Churinoff, because my last name is Churinoff, right? Instead of beef stroganoff, cashews or almond stroganoff. If I don't have that, it's not a big deal. On the airplane, if you don't get your Perrier water, you're not in first class, and they bring you bottled water. You say, what is this? I want Perrier. You're upset because you're attached to that. That's obviously something that we'd like to be able to overcome. To be content, to be satisfied, is the first step toward working toward renunciation. To have contentment and satisfaction. Not necessarily to be striving, I need more. Before I practice the Dharma, I need to have a condominium with soundproofed walls. I need to have a bank account that will see me through. Making all sorts of, even if your thought is, I need these things to practice the Dharma, generally we think we need those things to be happy. those are what are called the worldly concerns, the 8 worldly concerns. Have you heard that before? The 8 worldly dharmas or 8 worldly concerns. So 2 sets of 4, so they're in pairs. Wanting to have pleasure of the senses and wanting to be free of what's unpleasant. Even working on one of these things just for some time, thinking, okay, pleasure is okay, but it's fleeting. And do you remember right now, does it bring you great satisfaction, all the pleasures that you've had of your life? Sometimes we can remember, nice, we spent time with loved ones, or we went to a beautiful forest or something. All of them are fleeting. When they're gone, they no longer can bring satisfaction to you when you're longing for them. Even if you missed out, you weren't selected as, what is it, a king and queen of the prom or something. Afterwards, it didn't matter. At that time, it seemed really important. Pleasure of the senses, possessions, wealth, and so forth. To recognize the shortcomings of them, that having them, you sometimes brings new problems. You have to protect them. You worry about your stock. I have some friends in Singapore that used to always be on looking at Bloomberg TV, where they had the stock prices to see if their wealth was going down, or so much of one's life is engaged in those things. Hearing sweet ego-pleasing words, being famous, wanting to have fame, not to be criticized, and so forth. All of these are called the 8 worldly concerns. So to work on the beginning level, to start to work on this, to see that these are not necessary to bring real happiness. You can find a more long-lasting kind of happiness. It was called, the beginning level of Dharma happiness is just calm, Maybe seems boring, just watching the breathing. Oh, this is boring, Just all of the other problems disappear, and what otherwise might be thought of as a neutral state is actually quite satisfying, because you're not besieged by worries and unfulfilled wishes and ambitions. So that's the beginning level. The great Tibetan saint Milarepa, who attained enlightenment in one lifetime, it said in his previous incarnation, I don't know if you know, have you heard of, Leah in particular, have you heard of Milarepa? Anyone else not heard of Milarepa? David, that's a no, you haven't heard of Milarepa? No, you've heard. Anyway, Milarepa, I have a tanka of Milarepa down that was given to me by one of my Dharma friends when I started my 3-year retreat. So Milarepa in his previous life had sowed the seeds of these Dharma realizations that he was later going to develop by saying over and over again, he was a disciple of the Kadampa, in the Kadampa tradition, the great teacher Atisha, who came to Tibet from India. So he used to say, the 8 worldly concerns are not something to get involved in. The 8 worldly concerns are to be equalized, whether I have pleasure or suffering, not to be overly concerned with that. That kind of imprint in his mind is what led him in his next life to be able to be a yogi in the mountains under austere circumstances, and to put all his effort into the Dharma and achieve enlightenment in one lifetime. It doesn't mean you have to be that way. You don't have to live an austere life. One of the great realized beings in our tradition, the Gelugpa tradition, his name is escaping me from it. It'll come in a second. He lived in the monastery, in Sera Monastery. He was recognized as a reincarnated Lama. He had his own, what they call labrang, his own little housing unit, had good food, but he was not attached to it. He had people to take care of him, you know, to bring him things. He had good clothes. And he achieved enlightenment in one lifetime also. So renunciation doesn't mean that you have to be poor. Renunciation is a state of mind in which, you know, if you have the karma to have resources and pleasures, but not to be obsessive about them, that's a good step for developing renunciation. Then when you start to see in more detail in the future, if I was to be born in the God realm, am I missing something now? You know, there might be the beauty of the people, you know, is enormous. You know, even the most attractive, who's the best person now for women? Brad Pitt? No, I don't know, that's old. One time it was Richard Gere. I think I've mentioned in other courses. In a course in Japan one time, I mentioned in a big auditorium of people, I said, imagine embracing Richard Gere. And I could hear from the back of the room someone go, you know, suddenly, nowadays, maybe Richard Gere is not a good example, but the most attractive man, the most attractive woman on the earth pales in comparison to the beauty of the beings in the God realm. But that, even if we had the experience with them, it wouldn't be satisfying. I mean, we think we would have pleasure seeing them, but after a while it becomes boring. It no longer brings the pleasure that we had at the first moment of seeing them and so forth. So meditating in all of these different ways to recognize there is no, the word you used at the beginning, marvel of cyclic existence, the perfections of cyclic existence, that is real pleasure. It's all just reducing one suffering by, you know, coming in contact with something else, which is the nature of suffering. Hot goes down, the cold goes up, you feel, you know, and then when the cold gets a little too greater than the heat, you think, I'd like to be in the warm sun again, you know. So it takes a long time to meditate on this, and it also requires an accumulation of virtuous karma that acts as a support for the mind. So in our daily practice, when we offer the mandala, we do the 7-limb offering to the gurus, to the Buddhas, that accumulates virtue. And in our everyday life, if we start to be a little more generous when we see people that are in need, to give something to them, to practice ethics and so forth, all of these contribute to the strength of our mind that will allow us then to make these realizations. One of my teachers in Italy, Geshe Jumpa Getsul, who was the teacher there, and so the top, the big kahuna or whatever you want to say, he told me a story when one of our great gurus was visiting Serkon Senshab Rinpoche, who was a tutor to the Dalai Lama. He asked Serkon Rinpoche, he said, Rinpoche, I can't, you know, everything's so comfortable here. I have people bringing me tea, my meals are made, my clothes are washed. I have difficulty generating renunciation. And Serkon Rinpoche said, oh, for you, and this was just for him in particular, it would be good to do prostrations reciting the Vajrasattva mantra to purify negative karma, because there's some obstacles in your mind that prevent you from making that realization. Seeing the shortcomings, just, being in the here and now. So there's various, all of these various things are useful in our practice. They fortify the mind. We generate virtuous karma, eliminate, we try to purify negativity. That makes things a little clearer in our mind, and we can see the totality of the situation. So it's a long enterprise, developing renunciation. That doesn't mean that we have to forego developing bodhicitta or wisdom of emptiness until we first have renunciation. In fact, though investigation of those subjects also we can better understand the suffering nature of cyclic existence, the shortcomings of attachment to the marvels of cyclic existence. If you realize emptiness, if you have an insight into emptiness, you start to understand how our mind projects upon appearances some kind of reality that is not really there. Then we start to see how we project pleasure on that which is actually of the nature of suffering, how we project cleanliness on that which is the nature of impurity and which is actually repulsive. So anyway, that's short answer or long answer. Maybe that instead of giving you an answer in a nutshell, I gave you an answer in a watermelon. Maybe bigger than you want.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have something that they wanted to investigate? Yeah, Nancy.
So can you talk a little bit, and you don't have to talk a lot, but this whole thing of eons and eons, it almost feels like hopeless that we're ever going to get somewhere.
I missed the first part. Can I talk a little bit about what?
About the time frame of eons and eons.
Oh,
that, you go through the 8 stages of the path, or the
And
each one has eons and eons, and there's a big of the big and a middle of the big, and it's like my head explodes. So I'm just like, okay, is this ever going to happen? Whereas the Zen, they think there's instantaneous.
Instantaneous enlightenment. So in Zen, there's a tradition of what are they called? Zazen and others, where they have a state called Satori. Is that what you're thinking of? Satori is sort of like, I once asked one of great Tibetan Lama, who's passed away since then, I think his name was Sonam Gyatso. And in Japanese, they couldn't say Gyatso, so they called him Sonami, instead of Sonam. Sonami, what was it? Hiroshi Sonami. Hiroshi, I think in Japanese, if anyone knows Japanese, maybe means ocean. So anyway, he said that we asked him, what is this Zen Satori? What is that? And he said, I think that is just some insight in single-pointed concentration when you start to feel some bliss. When we develop single-pointed concentration, the currents in our body, the what's called the prana, or the Chinese say qi, the winds within our body upon which the mind depends, they become serviceable, and you feel a great pleasure. And sometimes some insights in that, that's sometimes called satori, he said. From a Buddhist perspective, there was a great debate in Tibet about whether enlightenment was instantaneous, like from the Chinese tradition, Chan tradition, which is similar to Zen, or whether it was gradual. And there's still people that talk about, instantaneous realizations, even in Tibetan Buddhism. But what they mean is, if in previous lives, like Milarepa, you'd laid the seeds of realizations, that in future lives, things can happen very quickly. You don't know, Nancy, what's in your mind stream, what imprints you've deposited in past lifetimes. If you put your mind to it and you sit down, you could make realizations very quickly, depending on what you did in the past. It's those kind of individuals that seem to have instantaneous realizations. It's not as though there's a technique that if you just knew, if you paid your $10,000 for the trick, that you could, you can have, realize emptiness or overcome all these delusions. It's still, it requires some work, but all time itself is empty of inherent existence. We might think, oh, how long it's going to take. When you enter into the path, you develop renunciation, let's say, maybe an inkling of bodhicitta. In your future lives, you can build upon that, and you go from joy to joy once you start to have some experience like that. So one of the great pitfalls of the bodhisattvas is this sense of, let's say, kyoa, what do we say? Sort of like a kind of depression, self-deprecation, and a sense of, oh, I couldn't do this for eons, thinking of how many sentient beings there are, I have to ripen. And what is explained in the Prajna Paramita Sutras, the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. Prajna means wisdom. Paramita, we loosely translate as perfections, the 6 perfections and so forth. It's mentioned that the bodhisattvas have to use their insight into emptiness to see all of these things, that the mind is empty of true existence. Like we're meditating now, the clear light nature of the mind, this conventional nature of the mind, to see the ultimate nature of the mind is empty of inherent existence. All that means that all of these can be developed. There's nothing standing between us and being Buddha. Once you have that kind of insight, you can overcome that depression or fear of how long it's going to take and everything like that. And of course, with the possibility of practicing Tantra, like Milarepa, maybe you could become enlightened this lifetime or the next lifetime. So it's not so long. Okay, I don't know if that helps at all, but anyway. Okay, so we are spending these Sundays for a while until Geshe gets back. How was it, by the way, did anyone listen to Geshe's first lectures? He had a good connection? I was worried that he might not have a good internet connection. So until he gets back, we're talking about the 3 principles of the path. This book has the word aspects. You could call it 3 principal aspects or the 3 principles of the path: renunciation, bodhicitta, the wisdom that realizes emptiness. 3 essential principal realizations that you need to get from here to enlightenment. So we've talked up until now about renunciation. And last time I introduced, if you're using this book by Sonam Yunchen, page 85 or 65. Do I have my reading glasses on? Let's see. I need 2 different pairs of glasses. Here we go. Yeah, 85, the altruistic intention. So this is another way of calling bodhicitta. It's a state of mind out of altruism, wishing others to be free of suffering, to achieve enlightenment for their sake. So I mentioned this verse last time, number 6. Since the wish for freedom, that means renunciation, since the wish for freedom, if unaccompanied by the altruistic intention, if renunciation unaccompanied by bodhicitta will not act as a cause for the perfect happiness of unsurpassable enlightenment, the wise arouse the supreme intention to become enlightened. So it's not enough simply to have renunciation. Renunciation, along with wisdom, renunciation is kind of the motivation. The wisdom of selflessness is the active ingredient. Those two together can lead you to nirvana, to become an arhat, to escape from cyclic existence. A noble enterprise, but the Buddha himself in his sutras said that those of his disciples who were intelligent should not put all of their, well, he didn't say it this way, they shouldn't put all their marbles, you know, when you're a kid, shouldn't put all your marbles into the Hinayana, into the lesser vehicle. They should practice, they should know, the Buddha said, you should know the practices of the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, the two main practitioners of the Hinayana, the so-called hearers and the so-called solitary realizers. You should know their practices, you should practice them, but you should not bring them to completion. That is, you should not get overcome by finding your own nirvana, but instead you should practice the Mahayana, the great vehicle that gets you to the great destination. Like I mentioned last time, a stream that may divide, I can't put my fingers in the right direction, you know, divide into two. You can cross where there's two, you can enter into nirvana, remain eons in that state, and then be awakened by the Buddhas, and again enter into the world to develop bodhicitta and achieve enlightenment. Or you can cross the river once, just go from being an ordinary being to a Buddha. That's the more skillful thing to do. I mentioned last time also a text by Kunu Lama Rinpoche. Kunu Lama was I mentioned probably a little bit, the teacher of the Dalai Lama, who taught the Dalai Lama the Bodhisattva Charyavatara. Do you remember that? Mentioning that? So there is one text here translated by Gareth Sparham. I think you can find. So I thought to read every week a couple of these verses as interweave here. He's talking about the benefits of bodhicitta. He's the Lama that I mentioned. Lama Yeshe said, when Lama came back from hearing a lecture by him back to Kopan, he said, he's so amazing. He seemed like Jesus Christ. And I really thought what Lama was saying was that maybe he is the incarnation of Jesus Christ, you know, great love for living beings and so forth. Someone were to slap you on one cheek, you should offer them the other, you know, like real activity of the Bodhisattva. So verse 9 in his text, how could the wish to help that a mother, father, sage, or even Brahma has? So mothers want to help their children, fathers, their family, sages want to help the population. Brahma, the king of the form realm, you know, has some benevolence to others. How could the wish to help that a mother, father, sage, or even Brahma has possibly extend to every living creature like that wish of supreme bodhicitta? So bodhicitta is a state of mind that expands one's awareness of suffering to all living beings, not just out of compassion or pity for them, but wanting to help, wanting to eliminate that, and being in a position, as one practices the Buddhist path, if one achieves enlightenment or higher stages of the Bodhisattva path, one actually has the wisdom and means to be able to affect help to other sentient beings, not just ordinary help of, food and loan or, advice for the lovelorn or whatever, not just medicine, alleviating suffering, although those are noble concerns, and from the worldly point of view, probably are the most noble things ordinary people can think of, say being doctors, being able to alleviate suffering. If you alleviate the suffering of someone right now, in the future life, the karma that caused those illnesses may not have ripened and will come again in the future. What's the expression? If you teach, if you give a fish to a man, you feed them for a day. If you teach them how to fish, they have food for life, something like that, right? So a person with an imprint of bodhicitta might have a similar kind of idea that although I could become a doctor, it would be much better if I had the ability to alleviate the suffering of sentient beings in the future for perpetually. What's the word I'm trying to say? Perpetually, to give them the wisdom, leave imprints in their mind for them to find real Dharma happiness, not just some superficial happiness right now. Next verse. Just like the lotus among flowers, the lotus flower, just like the lotus among flowers is bodhicitta supreme among all virtuous thoughts. Well, it's kind of saying the lotus is supreme among flowers. Well, you might say, I like orchids better or something else. Here, the idea, the lotus, the special quality of the lotus in Indian mythology is that it can grow out of the mud, say a muddy pool, and as it comes up, and when it blossoms, it is unsullied by the mud, right? Have you heard that analogy before? Charlene, have you heard that? Nadine? So what's the sense of that? We talk about the bodhisattvas being in the world, but not of the world. I think they also said of Christ also, no? In the world, but not of the world. So to Leah's question before, also not being attracted, worry about being, giving up the marvels of cyclic existence. You can still have them. You're in the world, but not of the world. That means you don't let your worldly mind grasp to those, get angry if you don't have them, sad if if you don't find what you want. Just like the lotus among flowers is bodhicitta supreme among all virtuous thoughts. Since having it brings immediate and final happiness, one should make every effort to produce it. So here we're talking about the benefits of bodhicitta. Why you should think about it. Remember, the benefit of renunciation is without renunciation, there's no way you can escape from cyclic existence because you're so attached to the present. Here, benefits of bodhicitta, it brings immediate and final happiness of Buddhahood, and immediate happiness right now. When you start to take concern, cognizance of other people's suffering, and feeling some empathy for that, your own problems become less severe in your own mind. If you think about the suffering of the hell beings when you were experiencing some kind of pain, or you think about the suffering of animals that are under the influence of other, who are being eaten, hunted by other animals, who are owned by humans who don't give them freedom, that don't allow them to be with their kind, put them in zoos and so forth. when you start to think of the suffering of others, your own problems become less intense to you, because first of all, because they're not as great as the suffering of others. And when you start to open your heart to others, your own problems seem minor, since it brings immediate and final happiness. So you can find happiness in an otherwise irritating situation by developing bodhicitta. So therefore, one should make every effort to produce it. I'll read one more. Since even knowledge of all modes of meditation, actually what it means here is omniscience is called the knowledge of all modes. Anyway, since even knowledge of all modes has its origin in just this supreme bodhicitta, since omniscience has its origin in just this exceptional thought of bodhicitta, those who wish for freedom should certainly make it their work. So if we want to have temporary happiness, if we want to have ultimate happiness, bodhicitta is the thing to get. And I sometimes mention that if all of the Buddha's teachings were like milk from a cow, and if you were to churn that, I've got here, I'm thinking of the Tibetan churns. If you were to churn that, and the butter that comes from that, that's likened to the bodhicitta. The bodhicitta is like the essential ingredient of the Buddha's teachings. Of course, you don't see it exemplified in the Hinayana teachings. Mainly, the supreme motivation there is renunciation, to get out of cyclic existence for yourself. I've got to get out of this place. Bodhicitta is the supreme motivation of the Mahayana. We've got to get out of this place, putting yourself in the perspective of all sentient beings, not just your own. So this text says, since the wish for freedom, if unaccompanied by bodhicitta, will not act as a cause for the perfect happiness of unsurpassable enlightenment, another way of saying complete enlightenment, the wise arouse the supreme intention to become enlightened. Like I said before, the Buddha said, those of my disciples who are wise, don't put all your emphasis on my lesser vehicle, the Hinayana, sort of like a mini, I don't know if you have that name. There's the smallest fiat in Italy. Do you know what it's called? Anyone know the nickname? You know what a fiat is, right? They're really small cars in Rome. There's no parking spaces, essentially. So sometimes you want to have the smallest car. Anyone know what they're called? Topolino. Do you know what topo means in Italian? Mouse, right? Or rat. Topolino means mouse. So this little car, don't be content with the Topolino of my teachings, the small vehicle. Those who are wise will enter into my great vehicle, because it will lead to their own happiness more immediately and to the happiness of enlightenment. Those who follow the Hinayana path, even if they become arhats, if they're still alive, they might be considered to be praiseworthy and the most sublime beings. But when an individual who has just developed bodhicitta, still in Nancy's worry, all of these paths to go in the future, just developing bodhicitta, they excel the hearers and solitary realizer arhats in their lineage. So what does that mean? They have entered into the bodhisattva lineage. When you develop bodhicitta, you become a bodhisattva. Well, why is that important? Why? It's said that the desire realm gods even come down at the time someone develops bodhicitta to make offerings and praises. The person who develops bodhicitta may not see them, but they are the object of veneration by these. In the same way that the offspring of a king, whether it be a son or a daughter, maybe in ancient India, usually it was the prince, the males who would become king. So when a son is born, at that moment, the ministers, all the people come and make offerings because that individual will become the king in the future. So this is the sense of why the desire realm gods come down if one develops bodhicitta. You are destined to become a Buddha. You have that essential ingredient. You are born into the family of the Buddhas. There's a famous text that you may have heard called the 37 Practices of All the Buddha's Sons, or 37 Practices of the Bodhisattvas. So it's that sense that when you develop bodhicitta, you become a son or daughter of the Buddha. That means you are going to become, you are born in that lineage, you are going to become a Buddha. So if you develop that mind, you become more revered by those who are wise, even by the desire realm gods, than the arhats of the Hinayana. So we're talking about some of the benefits because it is the importance of bodhicitta is stressed in the sutras again and again. So let me go on to the next verse, verse 7. So this was, we're just introducing some of the benefits of bodhicitta. Now, verse 7, swept away by the strong currents of the four great rivers, bound by the tight bonds of actions which are hard to escape, ensnared in the iron meshes of conception of a self, beings are shrouded in thick darkness of ignorance. So once you start to think about the benefits of bodhicitta, in order to develop it, you have to develop an understanding of the suffering of sentient beings, to develop empathy for them and compassion for them. Basically, that depends on having familiarized yourself with renunciation, seeing even the marvels, use Leah's term, even the marvels of cyclic existence are the unsatisfactory. They don't bring real happiness. They're fleeting, they're insubstantial, and they cause us to be born again and again in cyclic existence. As we're always searching for that happiness, the marvels of cyclic existence, we create negative karma that causes us to be born again in cyclic existence. One of the sayings of the Buddha, although sentient beings want to be happy, they don't know the methods to find real happiness. And in their zeal to find happiness, they create negative karma that just causes them more suffering. So this verse number 7 is talking about various ways to understand the suffering of sentient beings, to develop compassion for them. Beings are shrouded in a thick darkness of ignorance, swept away by the strong currents of the four rivers. Actually, the Tibetan word here, chuo, roots don't have translated as rivers. Actually, it's the Sanskrit word oga means floods. So these are famous in the Hinayana tradition, also in the Hinayana Sutras, the four floods. What are those? Floods are, when the flood comes, it sweeps away everything in its path. Maybe you could say the four tsunamis, if you want. Is that a word part of our lexicon now, tsunami, when a great amount of water sweeps everything away. So what are the 4 great rivers or 4 floods or 4 tsunamis? To develop the altruistic intention, to develop bodhicitta, think about how living beings, your mothers of the past, are swept along by 4 swiftly flowing rivers or floods or tsunamis. There is the torrent of ignorance, the tsunami or flood of ignorance, which consists of obstructions which can be only eliminated on the path of seeing and meditation. That means there's certain obstructions in our mind, like the presence of the seeds of hatred and desire, attachment, jealousy, pride, and all of these. These are obstructions, both their manifestation now and the seeds of them in our mind. Even though you may not be angry right now, Israel, are you angry right now? No, right? Does that mean that you will never get angry? Also, no. Why? Because we have potential to develop anger in our mind. So both the manifest anger and its seed are obstructions. So, what did I say? The tsunami of ignorance, or the river of ignorance, the torrent of ignorance, consists of obstructions which can be only eliminated on the paths of seeing and meditation. So most sentient beings that we see are not on the path of seeing. When you see emptiness directly and you eliminate some of the obstructions, or on the path of meditation, when having meditated on emptiness again and again, you've eliminated the rest of the obstructions. Most people are not like that. So they're bound by that kind of flood of ignorance. The flood of views comprises the 5 wrong views. Have you heard of the 5 wrong views before? James? No? Anyone? Susie?
I've heard that name, but I can't think what it is now.
Oh, okay. Anyone know what the 5 or any of the 5 wrong views are? No? No takers?
Well, I could try. This is Saida. I think it's having a false sense of the I and having extreme views or wrong views. Is that something like that?
That's pretty good. Yeah, I don't know why the yellow box didn't come around your name there. Usually when someone speaks, that I can see more clearly there because there's a little yellow box around the picture. Yeah. So the five wrong views, when we talk about, let me ask you this. Have you heard of the 6 delusions? 6 root delusions? Leah had a smile. Did you ever heard of the 6 delusions? 6 root delusions?
Yes, but couldn't name them, but I've heard of them.
Okay. Anyone has not only heard of them, but could name some of them? So we I talked before, there is said to be 84,000 different distorted states of mind, klesha or delusions. If you condense them down, you could say there are 6 root delusions. If you condense those down, you could say 3 poisonous minds. 3 poisonous minds: attachment, hatred, and ignorance, right? All sort of things are manifestations of those. The 6 root delusions are what? Ignorance, attachment, anger. What else are there? Do you know, Matt? Do you know?
Greed.
Greed.
Pride. Pride.
Pride is one of them. Greed is more like attachment. Yeah. Pride.
Jealousy.
No, not jealousy. Jealousy you find when you talk about tantra, doubt, deluded doubt, and wrong view. Those are called the 6 root delusions. So wrong view itself can be divided into 5. Okay, now look at look at my fingers here. Here's the first 5 I said, and wrong view. So the wrong view can be divided into 5. So sometimes we say the 10 delusions. You know, these are all non-views: attachment, anger, ignorance, doubt, pride. And then there are 5 delusions that are views. So the first one of them is called the view of the transitory collection. Have you heard of that before, that expression? Nadine has. Israel has not. Nadine nodded. Is that right, Nadine? Okay.
Yes.
Susie and James have not. Who else has heard of that? Just out of curiosity. Leah has not. Nancy
I have.
has. Okay, so we're sort of 50-50 here. So what is that? From the point of view of wisdom, the view of the transitory collection is like the root of cyclic existence. It's the ignorance that causes us to generate all the rest of our delusions. What is the view of the transitory collection? First of all, what is the transitory collection? Transitory collection means the 5 aggregates. It's a collection of 5 aggregates, right? Why are they called transitory? Because they are impermanent, right? That's one way of labeling them, the transitory collection. So the view of the transitory collection means a particular kind of ignorance that views that which is based on the collection of the 5 aggregates, which means the self, the sense of self. It views the self as being inherently existent. It means your own self. If I have an idea that Anna, who is based on 5 aggregates, the transitory collection, if I have the view that Anna is inherently existent, that's not called the view of the transitory collection. It refers to the ignorance that grasps to your own self-identity and thinks of it as being inherently existent. That's sometimes called the root of cyclic existence. In other circumstances, it says, because that's just one kind of ignorance, right? Viewing your own self as being inherently existent. What about other people's selves? What about the apparent inherent existence of other things like trees and houses and cars and other things? That general kind of grasping to inherent existence is generally just called ignorance. So there are 2 different, in different texts by Nagarjuna and Chandrakirti. One said, ignorance is the root of cyclic existence, and the other said, the view of the transitory collection is the root of cyclic existence. Anyway, the grasping for inherent existence, the belief in that, the adherence to that, assenting to that, belief that things really are as they appear, findable within their parts, that is said to be the root of cyclic existence. So the first of the 5 wrong views is the view of the transitory collection as a real I and mine, M-I-N-E. Subtle. When we study emptiness a little bit, we'll talk about the difference between that grasping to I and mine. It doesn't mean like this pen is mine. So grasping to the pen, it still is a sense of mineness in your own mind, based on looking at the pen as mine, but the sense, the pen, there's a sense of mine, which is similar to the sense of I as being inherently existent. very interesting if you have a chance to study. Have you heard that before, Anna? The difference between I and mine? No? Anyone?
No, Venerable, not put that way anyway.
Okay. So the second of the 5 views is extreme views. I won't go into detail into these extreme views. Another one is wrong views. Another is called considering wrong forms of discipline and conduct to be supreme. Example of that is Indian, the Vedic followers, or the Hindus, you might say. You've probably seen people with putting the ash all over their body and standing in the sun, or standing on one leg for years. Have you heard of people like that? There's some idea that that kind of discipline or conduct will lead to liberation, to moksha. That's another word for liberation in Sanskrit, moksha. Sometimes people might think I said mocha. That's coffee, right? Moksha, different. So there are wrong view that's an incredible impediment to the spiritual path, thinking that some wrong path, some wrong kind of conduct will actually lead you to liberation. Maybe you've heard of Angulimala. Have you heard of one famous character in the Buddhist time, Angulimala? Anyone? Oh, so Anguli means fingers or thumbs, I think. Anguli means thumb. Mala means rosary, right? You know, like you're counting rosary, or garland. So Angulimala, he didn't have that name from birth. He was called that because he was taught by his misguiding guru that collecting 1,000 thumbs of people, killing them and collecting their thumbs, making a rosary of that, a garland of that on a string, hanging it around his neck, would, if he had that, he would be liberated. He would find liberation, moksha. Do you think that would work? If you killed 1,000 people and made a rosary of the, no, come on. It's ridiculous, right? Yeah, thank you. Israel's thumbs down. Okay, so that's another example of kind of wrong, view of misguided forms of discipline and conduct to be supreme. And then holding faulty views as supreme, thinking that the other 4 of these views are the supreme views to have. Those are called the 5 wrong views. So we talked about these 4 torrents, or how sentient beings are swept away by these 4 tsunamis or 4 great rivers. We talked about the river of ignorance, the river of the 5 views, the river of views, then the river of desire, or the torrent of desire, means all of the delusions of the desire realm, other than ignorance and misleading views that are associated with the desire realm. So where we reside right now is the desire realm. It includes the desire realm, also includes the animal realm, the hungry ghost realm, the hell realm, all of those, and certain of the gods, the devas. Those are called that is called the desire realm. It's called the desire realm because being born in this realm, we are mainly concerned with objects of desire. Just like when Leah's question before, the marvels of cyclic existence and so forth. This is called the desire realm. Above that are two other realms called the form and formless realm. Have you heard of that before? Form and formless? Some of you have. I notice Charlene is looking away so she doesn't have to nod her head. Have you heard of the form and formless realms, Charlene?
Yes, but I'm taking notes. I'm not.
Oh, okay. I thought you were, so like in class when you're a kid, you know, you put your head down and you don't want the teacher to ask you or something like that. Larry, have you heard of the form and formless realms? That's up, that means you have, right? Okay. So the form realm is a region that we can be reborn in. It's not forever. In the future, the main cause to be born in the form and formless realms are developing a certain super kind of concentration, single-pointed concentration, in which you see the, say, for instance, to develop the first concentration of the form realm, you meditate on the disadvantages of the desire realm. You know, all these things that we're attracted to, the marvels of the desire realm, and the advantages of the first concentration, how there your mind is free of a lot of the delusions of the desire realm. If you meditate in that way, you can actually develop a state of mind that is separated from attachment to the desire realm. You achieve a mind of the first concentration, or the first concentration of the form realm. Even above that, there's a second concentration, third concentration, fourth concentration. So that's called the form realm. Individuals who are born in the form realm after this lifetime, having previously created that karma by meditating on it, they have long lives. They spend that time in not much virtuous activity, although it is possible to create virtue in the form realm. Beyond that is another realm called the formless realm, where the individuals who are born there by similar kind of meditation have no gross form at all. They're just mind concentrating on infinite space or infinite consciousness or something like that. Those are the three realms: the desire realm, the form realm, and the formless realm. So I say the four rivers or four torrents or four tsunamis: the river of ignorance, the river of views, then the river of desire, which means all the other delusions of the desire realm other than ignorance and views. And then the last one is called the river of or the flood of existence, which means all of the delusions of the form and formless realms. You don't see it so much in usual texts, but I'll quote you something here from one of the Hinayana Sutras at Sarvasti. Sarvasti is Shravasti, sort of. Anyone been to India? Has anyone visited the Bodh Gaya and Varanasi and so forth? Did you go to Shravasti, Nancy? No. There's an abbey in Washington State that was built by, or under the influence of one of our female nuns, Thupten Chudran, a great teacher, called Shravasti Abbey. Shravasti was a place in India where the Buddhists spent many, many rainy seasons. It's a region. So at Shravasti, the Buddha said, monks, there are these four floods, four tsunamis. Which four? The flood of sensuality, that's what we're calling here desire. So that means the delusions of the desire realm. The flood of becoming, that's the existence, that's the delusions of the form and formless realm. The flood of views, these five wrong views, and the flood of ignorance. These are the four floods. So there are many references in the Hinayana Sutras to these four floods. You find them sometimes mentioned in different prayers and so forth. So what is it? What is the verse saying? So when we're thinking about sentient beings suffering, they're under the influence of all of these delusions. The delusions of the desire realm, the delusions of the form and formless forms when they're born there, the delusions of the five wrong views, the delusion of ignorance and so forth. So to feel how helpless they are, they're bound by these views, swept away by the four strong currents of the four rivers, the four floods, bound by the tight bonds of actions which are hard to escape. So before most of you got on, a couple of you were on, Anna was asking something about, she felt right now a lot of bad things were happening due to her karma. We are, you might think, oh, if I could just develop my mind and be sharp and incisive and wise, I'd have no problems. But we have a legacy of karma from past lives. Oh, from the beginning of this life, still karmic imprints in our mind stream. Like when you plant seeds, what did Christ say supposedly in the New Testament? Ye reap what ye sow, right? I think that's one of the best explanations of karma from Buddhist perspective. If you plant seeds in your mind stream of avarice, of miserliness, you don't give, in the future you will be bereft of belongings, because to have belongings you have to give. You have to be generous and indulge in that. With that state of mind, you create the karma. You plant the seed in your mind stream in the future to be the recipient of possessions, So we are bound by our past karma. Even you try to be good and you try to avoid any kind of problems, when karma is ready to ripen, it comes. So we are bound by our past karma. So the same thing with sentient beings. When trying to develop empathy for them, a sense of compassion or pity or mercy for them, to realize that all these living beings are, what do we say, swept away by these currents, these states of mind, the four floods. They are bound by their past karma, which is very difficult to escape, to overcome. To purify our negative karma takes effort and knowledge how to do it. So most sentient beings don't know that. Ensnared in the iron meshes of conceptions of a self, the iron nets, a common kind of terminology that you find in the Buddhist scriptures, talking about the mesh or net of conceptions. Our beliefs that don't have any basis in reality, sort of like trapped in that web or that net, like a spider caught, a fly caught in a spider's web. Beings are shrouded in a thick darkness of ignorance. So this verse is beginning to talk about how to recognize other living beings, not as autonomous enemies or competition or, objects of your desire, but to recognize their plight in cyclic existence. These are all things that could be talked about oneself to develop renunciation, but particularly in this instance, it's talking about how to recognize sentient beings as being overpowered, having no freedom. they can't find happiness, real happiness. There's a verse in the Entry into the Middle Way, which is written by Chandrakirti, which is a great text on emptiness. Chandrakirti was one of the main expositors, you might say, explainers of Nagarjuna's writings on emptiness. So Chandrakirti talked about how living beings are like the watermill. We're caught in a watermill. You know what a watermill is in India? James is nodding. You know, anyone know what a watermill is? Where they would have maybe the oxen would walk along and pull a string, and it would cause this pulley to, little cups would go down into the water, and then they would come up and they would fall over. The water would fall into a canal to irrigate the plants. So the person, you didn't have to go down there yourself with buckets and pull out the water, right? It's called a water mill. Does that sound familiar? I don't know. What do we have in the West? Something like that. Maybe you say a water pump. So Chandrakirti likened sentient beings as, sometimes going up to the top of cyclic existence and then going down, bumping against each other like the buckets in the water mill, crashing against each other, clashing in various ways. All of these different analogies are given to, we talk about floods and what did we say here? Bound by the tight bonds of karma, ensnared in the mesh or net or web of conceptions and so forth, just to try to start to develop a sense of the plight of the suffering of other sentient beings. I'll quote from this text again. He quotes Shantideva. Shantideva said in his Bodhisattva Charyottara, for bodhisattvas, even if their life is threatened, there's a danger of their life being threatened, that causes no wrong doing, no negative actions, but a natural growth of virtue. I pay homage to the bodies of those in whom has arisen the precious and holy state of mind of bodhicitta. I take refuge in those who are a source of happiness, who ally you to happiness even when harmed. So when we talk about, I've recently been teaching about the 6 perfections. We talk about the perfection of patience. One of the kinds of patience is the patience not to retaliate, when harmed. Usually when we hear harsh words, we say, someone says, you're an idiot. Yeah, you're a bigger idiot. Someone hits you, you hit them back. Say bad words and you say back. So the patience of not retaliating, accepting harms and not retaliating, for the Bodhisattva goes further than the Hinayana view of patience, not retaliating. It means that not only don't you retaliate, but you actually work for their benefit. I mentioned in some other talks, so you may have heard this example before. One of my teachers, Geshe Rapton, who was one of the tutors of the Dalai Lama, when he was at Sera Monastery as a young boy and a great scholar, and other people were jealous of him, he would hear criticism of him from others, not necessarily directly, but he'd hear rumors, other people are talking about him. He used to say that was one of the best ways to purify your negative karma, when others talk about you behind your back. So instead of, criticizing them back or whatever, he invited them to his little humble room and prepared for them a meal of Tibetan momos. I don't know if any of you know. Nancy knows momos. You've been to India, right? Some of you, Matt, have you had momos? steamed dumplings with, usually the Tibetans make them with meat. If there's a rare vegetarian among the Tibetans, they make potato momos or with delicious spices in them, but generally that means meat momos. So for Geshe Raptin, he was not a Geshe at that time, he was just a monk. That was a big expense and takes hours to make and rolling out. Recently on cable TV, there's reruns of Crazy Rich Asians. Did anyone see that movie? Susie, did you see Crazy Rich? It's a good movie. So recent, and in one scene in it, they're making Chinese steamed dumplings. I think that's what the Tibetans call momos. So instead of, when others harm you, when others harm a bodhisattva, not only do they not retaliate, they actually work for their benefit. In response to the harm that they received, they benefit. So this is one of the other exemplary qualities of the bodhisattva, someone who has bodhicitta within their mind. Do you think you could do that yourself? Next time someone harms you, see if you can restrain from reacting, retaliating, and actually do something for their benefit. Okay, I've gone over 1 or 2 minutes over our time here. So before we end with a dedication, anyone have any thoughts or questions or clarifications? Matthew. Matt's got his hand up first.
Thank you, Venerable. You mentioned the 6 root delusions.
Yes.
And doubt was one of them. What kind of doubt are they talking about?
So this is what's called deluded doubt, afflicted doubt. So that means generally doubting, is the cinema to the left or the right? That's not the doubt that we're talking about here. Doubt is generally a mind that is uncertain. It might be this, it might be that. So deluded doubt is thinking, maybe, one example, maybe the self exists as it appears to my mind, inherently existent. Maybe it doesn't, unsure, but leaning in the direction probably exists. There probably is a real self. So that's called deluded doubt. It's not even, there's some doubts that are positive. Say, for instance, maybe the self exists, maybe it doesn't. Well, the Buddha said it doesn't. All the Dalai Lama says it doesn't exist the way it appears. So probably it doesn't exist. That would not be called deluded doubt. So deluded doubt is just this one kind of doubt that leads, maybe one can become enlightened, maybe one cannot. Maybe one can escape from cyclic existence, maybe you can't. You probably can't escape from cyclic existence. That would be deluded doubt. Maybe you can become enlightened, maybe you can't. Nah, there's no way to become enlightened. That would be called deluded doubt. Thinking, doubting, having some qualm, but leading in the wrong direction for something substantial like that. It doesn't mean deluded doubt. Maybe the Mets play at Madison Square Garden. Maybe they play in Meigs Field. That's not called deluded doubt. It's talking about things, doubting things that are influential toward your spiritual development. Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely. It helps. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Susie, did you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Venerable. Just a quickie. The 4 floods, I'm missing one. Sensuality, 5 wrong views, ignorance, and
let's see. So we say the flood of ignorance, the flood of views, the flood of desire, which means that all the other delusions of the desire realm other than ignorance and views, and the flood of existence, which means all the delusions of the other form and formless realm. Did you get that? The flood of ignorance, the flood of views, the flood of desire and the flood of existence. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else have a question? Yeah, Larry.
I was wondering
Larry's just trying to
an email
unmute.
address that we could
Okay.
communicate.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Can you hear me? All right. I saw a translation, another translation, where it lists the four rivers as birth, aging, sickness, and death.
Right. So the problem is this. In Tibetan, the word that's used in this these verses, chuo, it's actually referring to this Sanskrit word ora, which means floods. And this is well known. But you could, in other contexts, the same word chuo sometimes means river, and we talk about the four kinds of suffering. The suffering of birth, aging, sickness, and death. But here it's going beyond that. It's talking about the plight of sentient beings being impelled by these floods. They have no choice because their minds are overcome by these misconceptions. Okay, that help?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. So let's do a little dedication, allow you to get back to your Sunday activities. Is the finals of Roland Garros on today? The French Open? No. Oh, I thought there'd be some tennis fans. I saw, what was it? Nadal lost in the semifinals the other day. I was watching, who was one of my favorites. Rowena.
My phone says, because it just blinked this on, it says Novak Djokovic won the French Open.
Oh, okay. He's the one that...
I don't know. My phone covers that stuff.
Okay, that's interesting. I thought maybe that you would spend your afternoon watching it. Maybe you'll watch the replays of that. Anyway,
No.
let's do a little meditation, a little dedication here. At the beginning, we try to set a good motivation. In the middle, we try to keep concentration and a positive state of mind to create virtuous karma. Knowing that we've created some virtuous karma this morning, think, may this karma not ripen simply in some frivolous, insubstantial, samsaric happiness in the future, but I'm going to invest it. I'm going to dedicate it to my continual development of realizations from now until enlightenment for the welfare of all sentient beings. Due to these merits, may I quickly become a Buddha in order to lead each and every sentient being into that very same state. Thank you very much. So have a good remainder of your weekend, and hopefully we'll see you again next week. There will become a time when Geshe is well enough, I suppose, that he will continue, but I will be here as your substitute until Geshe recovers. So have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Take care.